Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whenever you hear this message, I pray that you're poised to receive, to accept, and to respond to words of wisdom. Ashe. I remember some years ago being in a cafe in Oakland, and I was wearing my traditional attire with my ileke, which is typical. And a lady comes up to me and says, you're not supposed to wear your ileke out. You're supposed to tuck it. You're supposed to tuck it so that people can't see. And she was genuinely trying to be helpful, right? And so I didn't feel like going all into it with her, so I just smiled and said thank you. And I kept it moving. But it's emblematic of lots of exchanges that I've had with people in person and online, um, particularly between people who practice the diasporic tradition, the Afro-Cuban tradition, the Brazilian tradition, and people who practice the West African tradition, what we call Isheshe. Whereas in the diaspora, there's a a more of a secrecy, you know, um, your ileke and even your Orisha shrines and your Orisha name and all these things are considered secret, secret, secret. You never reveal them or divulge them, right? And that has everything to do with our experience here in the diaspora, right? But in West Africa, the tradition is just different. It's expressed in a different way. There are things that are much more public, right? For example, wearing your ileke or you're bearing a Yoruba name and Orisha name. It's generally speaking more public, right? Now, of course, there have been accommodations made in these regards everywhere. Nigeria is not exempt. West Africa overall is not exempt from these kinds of adjustments. That's not what I'm trying to suggest. What I'm saying is that it is just the perceptions are different. The way people do it in the diaspora in general is different from how things are done in West Africa in general. Okay. And so when you come from either perspective and you take a position that this is how it's done or this is not how it's done, you're bound to offend people, right? You're bound to offend people because on just the most basic level, they're doing what they're doing is clearly permissible by their tradition. And so, you know, you saying that I can't wear my ileke out, or I'm not supposed to wear my ileke out, it's like, it doesn't even make sense because I'm clearly wearing my ileke. And, that's not a problem in my tradition. And so when people tend to communicate in these ways where you assume that what you do is what everybody does, it leads to inevitable confusion and conflict, right? And so um, on a basic level, we're dealing with cultural diversity. And so I'm reminded of a technique we used to use in diversity workshops when I was a trainer, and it's called making I statements. So I want to share this very simple technique with you with the hopes that you would be able to minimize confusion and maximize the opportunity to create mutual understanding between you and people who do things differently than you do. And so it looks basically just like this. Instead of saying you are supposed to wear your ileke tucked, or you can't post this online, or it's not appropriate to share pictures of this on Facebook. Instead of saying that, you say, I wear my ileke under my clothes. I was taught to wear my ileke under my clothes. In my tradition, I was shown that these things, or I was told that these things are private, they're secret, right? I don't agree with you doing things that way. I don't like my tradition being presented in this manner, right? All of those are examples of I statements. And when you make an I statement, it does two things. Number one, it gives you the opportunity to reflect on what you're saying. It gives you the opportunity to really internalize and absorb, this is me. This is my perspective. I need to own my own perspective. I need to own my bias. I need to own my approach as legit for me, or or just as part of what I understand. This is me. This is personal to me. Likewise, it creates an opportunity for the listener to to not be offended, because here someone is just telling me what they think or how they feel or what their experience is. They're not trying to mandate or dictate to me what I have to do. They're not judging me for what I do. They're telling me about their perspective. It just eases it up. It doesn't totally eliminate confusion or conflict, but it reduces the chances that you're going to have conflict from the giddy up, right? So I want to invite you to do that. Start making I statements. Start making I statements. Okay, and this is something that's also, it's a recurring it within my school. There's oftentimes, or sometimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but sometimes I have students who are coming from, for example, the Afro-Cuban perspective. And this is how they do it in the Afro-Cuban perspective. And then they start making statements about, well, this is what this is, and this is what this is, and this is how you do this, and this is how you do that. When in reality, that isn't the case. That's how you do it. That's not how we do it. Right. And so it would change the dynamic dramatically if you would, make understanding. Let me even put it this way. Then I have students who are also from the Afro-Cuban tradition who always make I statements. They always approach it from, hey, you know what? This is how we do it in the Lukumi tradition, or this is how we do it in my house. This is how my godfather taught me to do this. This is how my godmother taught me to do that. Just for the purposes of creating mutual understanding, right? Because in that instance, people are coming to actually learn. So they're telling me, hey, well, this is my understanding of how you say this and how you do that. Um, give me some understanding as to, how it's done in the West African tradition. Right. So they're giving me the insight as to what they do and how they've been trained to give, so I understand their point of reference. Right. It makes it so much easier. It makes it so much easier than people who are unaware of the fact that your way of doing it isn't the way of doing it. Okay. And so it reminds me of a particular verse of Ifa, wherein Ifa tells us that the wisdom of one place is the folly of another. And this particular verse is about a farmer, and this farmer had a bumper crop, which meant he had something that farmers never have, which is leisure. He had time and money, and so he decided he was going to take his son on a tour to expose him to the wisdom of the world. So he packs up all his stuff. Everybody gathers around, and they're all excited because they don't typically get to do stuff like that. And he tells them, we'll be back, and I can't wait to share with you the wisdom of the world. He and his son take off riding on a horse. They get to the first town, and people start to criticize him. They say, this guy, this is what's wrong with the world today. He's spoiling that child like the child deserves to be riding on the horse with him. He's fed that child and clothed that child, and now the child is riding up on him like they're equals. That's what's wrong with the world today. So the father says, oh, my son, we're getting our first taste of wisdom. When we go into the next town, you walk and I'll ride. And so they did. But when they arrived in the town like that, people criticized him. They said, look at this guy riding around like he's a king and the child is his slave. That's what's wrong with the world today. These people get a little something and they get carried away. They think that they're bigger than they are. Can't believe this. So father says, wow, my son, the wisdom of the world is vast. We're learning. In the next, I'm going to get off the town. I'm going to get off the horse and we'll go into the next town on foot. So they walk into the next town. And when they get there, the people just look in amazement. They criticize him. They said, "This is a fool if I ever saw one. He's got a horse and he's walking with the boy like they're the three amigos. What is going on here? This is what's wrong with the world. People have things and they don't even know how to use it." So now the father, they get freshened up. They water the horse. The son says, "Okay, Baba, where are we going next? What's going to be our next destination?" He says, "Son, we're going home. We've seen enough wisdom of the world." So they go back home, they get to the farm, and the people say, "Wow, tell us, what did you see? Give us some of the wisdom of the world." And the farmer said, "Yes, there are many stories to tell. The wisdom of the world is vast. It is vast. But what you need to know is that the wisdom of one place is the folly of another." And so we humble ourselves. We take ownership of what we know, and we make use of it until we see that it's not useful. But we always remember that the way we do it in one place, it doesn't make sense in another place. And so making I statements is how you acknowledge that distinction, and you take ownership of your own perspective and your own practice, and you take it out of trying to oblige other people or assume that other people have to do it or see it the way that you have been taught to see it and do it. And this message is important for all of us because the world is getting smaller and the Orisha community is interacting with one another more and more. But in particular, I'm delivering this message to the leaders because you, as the leaders, are going to be moving between different groups, and you're going to be facilitating the unification of different groups because leaders create shared vision and they attract people from different camps into one place. And so, for the leaders, I want you to really take this message to heed and start practicing making I statements everywhere that you go so that it can, facilitate mutual understanding and bridge building. This is essential to us being able to improve the world through positive influence. If you're one of the people who's committed to that kind of a cause, then I want you to find out how Obafemi Origunwa and the Orisha Lifestyle Academy can help you take your practice and your life to the next level. Visit me at obafemio.com or orishalifestyle.com. Let's start working together to help you live the medicine that will heal your life and heal the lives of those who you are destined to serve. I look forward to working with you. Until then, be blessed. Bye for now. Odabo.